Welcome in, hockey fans. It's week 2 of Hockey 101 with the best professor in all the game, the professor of hockey, the king of ice, and the talker of all things CHL, of all things junior hockey, of all things NCAA. I'll tell you what, we talked a lot last week and we laid that foundation. If you haven't watched, pause this right now. Go back and watch episode 1. That will lay the numbers, the foundation. That's the syllabus for this class, for this course that you'll be taking with us over the next 30 minutes today. But today, Lucas, throw all the cards out. Just you take them, just the old 52 pickup, right? Toss them out. Everything's changing. Tell the folks what we got today.
Well, today we've got a very special topic. We're going to be diving into what the CHL wants, what the CHL needs. Whatever makes the CHL happy sets me free. And I'm thanking Bob Turow for knowing exactly what does the CHL want out of all of this, Bob?
Guys, I spent all weekend on the phone with NHLPA agents, CHL people that are in the league and outside of the league, and D1 people. And the common theme is everybody's trying to figure out where everything's going. It's happened so fast. And I just have to tell you, I think I have a pretty good idea of what the CHL wants. And we're going to start off with number 1. They want all of the best 16 and 17-year-old players in Canada and in America to default into the CHL. And guys, for Power, Celebrini, and Fantilli that we talked about last week, those are layups. Those kids aren't going to move away from home. They're playing in the CHL. The question is, what about all the players just underneath them? A whole bunch of them are going to play in the NHL. Even more of them are going to play in the CHL. And as we knew it, the NCAA. But you know what I usually find with my kids and with hockey's players' kids? That whatever the best guys do, the rest follow. Make sense, Lucas?
I mean, absolutely, right? It's a kind of a catch-up system in one sense, right? Where you're always playing catch-up to the best guys in your age group. And so it makes sense that, well, if somebody's taking this route and they're making it to where I want to be, maybe that needs to be the route that I go to. I mean, that's at least the dominant thinking here. But, you know, it certainly creates a lot of stress for hockey players having to follow the likes of those guys around the league.
I think what you're seeing right now is you're seeing players who are in the USHL and the BCHL leave those leagues and go to the respective CHL leagues wherever they live. It's not fair to Division I people, because if there are kids who are 17 and 18 or years old right now in the CHL, they're not going to tell their CHL teams, hey, at the end of this year, I'm heading Division I. Yep. We'll find out those moves, if there are any, at the end of next year or at the end of this coming year. That's when we'll find out. But there's no question in my mind that the Canadians who went to the USHL or the BCHL or stayed in the OJ, they're going to play in the CHL if they possibly can. So the Canadians, I believe, are a layup, and that's exactly what the CHL wants. The Q wants, the O wants, and the Dub wants. The big question is going to be, what about the Americans?
Yeah, and Bob, that's the real question I have is for these American players, for players that aren't from Canada who have to cross that border, how does that work for those 16s and 17s that might have been missed by the CHL the first go around, or guys that just wouldn't have thought to go up there before this legislation came down from the NCAA? Talk us through that.
So I'm just going to give you some numbers. You know, guys, you guys know I love numbers. Right now in the CHL, there's 29 Americans, similar in the WHL, less in Quebec because prep school is a little bit more prevalent and always has been in their area of America. And I'm not sure how many people from New England speak French. So the numbers have always lagged a little bit as far as Americans going to the Q compared to the Western Hockey League and the OHL. How are the leagues going to get those Americans? Well, the CHL has a volume of scouts that Division One does not have, plain and simple. And they are supported by a central scouting agency that Division One does not have. They're identifying these kids at an earlier age than Division One is. When I was in the Ontario Hockey League, central scouting was more about identifying who the players were for the teams who had smaller scouting staffs probably at that time than what they do right now, and so that nobody would be missed. Today, central scouting is a little different, and I haven't even gone on the OHL website, but I can tell you this. I consider central scouting to be OHL or Western Hockey League or Quebec Maritime's Junior Hockey Central Marketing League or marketing organization. They have, I encourage anybody, go to the OHL website and take a look at their draft information. There's 10 different categories where you can get information. There's literature, there's social media, their draft coverage that I watched last year. It was an event. They did a really good job.
Yeah.
And the last time I checked, parents and kids, they like hearing their name on TV. So they have this already. The next thing they have, events. So you know that I started USHL combines. We called them USHL showcases when I was there. The CHL leagues have their own things. They have the exact same thing. In Ontario, for example, they have the OHL Cup, which has all the best Ontario teams and then some American teams. They have things that are going on in the summer. And then the Program of Excellence, which is really the ladder to get to the national junior team, is basically controlled by the CHL. So they are handling and influencing all of the best players at the U15, under 17, all those levels. They're in on those players. Here's the next part. National Hockey League player agents. Like I said, I talked to a bunch of agents this week. Two of them came right out and said it. Under the old model, it is in our best interest to send our players to the CHL. We've been recruiting these players since they've been 14 years old, maybe 15 at the oldest, maybe 13 at the youngest. We need them to get to signing it. We need them signing an NHL contract. And typically Division One hockey, because if you sign an NCAA or an NHL contract, you are ineligible to play Division One hockey. It's a slightly longer path. Well, when you've invested in a player, you want your money back. Now, that's not to say that if a player agent's client wants to play Division One, that they're going to dissuade him from going to play at Wisconsin or Minnesota or BU or BC or wherever it is that they're going. But if they're asked their opinion on what the fastest route to the National Hockey League will be, even though it isn't, because we looked at the numbers the other day, I think they would be swayed to sending their players to the CHL.
I do have a quick question for you, actually, Bob, on that note, because this is something that I feel like is getting talked about, but maybe isn't getting fully explored. So you're talking about NHLPA agents and where they'd like them to go, right? If the preference under the old model was to send them to the CHL, is it correct then, or would you agree that it's even more so now to send them to the CHL? Because now they can always sort of backtrack, quote unquote, into NCAA hockey if they decide they want to, for whatever reason, whether it's an academic reason, whether it's a development reason, whether it's whatever offer they have from somewhere, something for some reason. But doesn't the CHL become even more attractive for these NHLPA people because of that now flexibility?
So we're talking about 16, 17-year-olds in topic one. Mm-hmm. And the answer is yes. No question about it. When we get to the 18 and 19-year-olds, it gets a little bit more complicated. Write that one down, Lucas. Ask it again when we get to topic 2. I want to talk about the last thing that I believe is the biggest reason why the CHL will be able to default these kids into their league at 16 and 17 years of age. The NCAA isn't scouting them.
Yep.
I mean, it's that simple. I mean, I talked to two agents, PA agents today, who said their players are very interested in playing Division I hockey under the old rules. But the answer to them is you need to wait. Remember us talking last show? Maybe we shouldn't forget that either. They're not going to wait. They're going to the CHL. They're going to the CHL now. So now, if the NCAA is ignoring them, and it comes back to the age that they're recruiting hockey players, there is no question that they are definitely heading to the CHL, and they're only heading to the CHL with the CHL in mind.
Yep.
Not with Division I hockey possibly 2 years down the road in mind. Be fascinating to see. It'll be fascinating to see if Division I hockey changes the age that they recruit players at. Yes. By the way, the agents that I talked to today, Dan, half of them said Division I's going to get older, and we'll talk about that shortly here when we get to topic 2. Before we get done topic 1 and me answering any of the questions that you have, I want to talk a little bit about how this might affect the USHL and the national development team.
Yeah.
So I've always said about the national development team, of the 23 players they pick, I don't know, pick a number. There's 13 to 15 of them that are stone cold locks. Let's just say there's 15. They're easy. Dan, you could go in there with your limited hockey knowledge and you could pick those 15 players out.
Yeah.
And the next 8 players are the tough ones, right? That's where everybody at the program gets paid their money, and they have the debate over on who's going to fill those last 8 spots. And every year, and it varies from year to year, the CHL, out of those top 13 to 15 players, they steal 1 to 2 of those guys. They just go.
Yeah.
Because that's where they want to play. The question is, and I hear there's going to be a meeting between the USHL, the NA, and USA Hockey. The question is, will the development team lose more than 1 or 2? And if they lose more than 1 or 2, what happens? Hold that thought, write it down. We'll talk about that in episode 4.
I like that.
Okay. The USHL. So we looked at some numbers with the USHL, and they have some age requirements where they have to have some younger players, but typically they're still an older, heavier league.
Mm-hmm.
The 23 kids who don't make the development program, for the most part, would like to play in the USHL. There's exceptions, kids who want to continue to play prep school out east or Minnesota high school, and they're not going to go to the USHL right away. But for the players that they do get, by the way, they're not getting the Canadians anymore.
Yeah.
Just our opinion. Why would Owen Power leave Mississauga when he can play right in Ontario? Why would Celebrini leave, I think he's from BC, when he can play in the Western Hockey League? I mean, so now it comes down to the Americans for them. And by the way, we could be wrong about all of this, but you've got the tape, Lucas. We're not going to be wrong. The question is the USHL, not just the development team, are they going to lose players 24, 25, 26, 27, etc., after the development team takes their 23? Here's another thing I've always said about the development team. When you're taking 15-year-olds, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Okay? It's too hard to predict players out National Hockey League is really difficult. Imagine being in the Western Hockey League where you're drafting 14-year-olds and you're trying to predict them out when they're going to really help your team at 18. When I was in the USHL, there was a big debate as to whether we were going to take the USH or the development team into the USHL. Some wanted it, some didn't want it. They wanted to recruit. Some of the teams wanted to recruit against the development team. My answer to them was get them in, let them have the 23 that they want. They're going to hit on the no-brainers, the 13 to 15, and they're going to hit on some of the remaining 8 to 10, but they're going to miss on a bunch. They're going to miss on 5 of them. And because they're in your league, it's going to attract players 24 through 60. Yeah. That combined when we started the showcases and branding to younger kids, I believe is really what turned the corner. Well, that and a whole bunch of money. The owners did a really good job investing a whole bunch of money. But that's what really turned the USHL into the league that it is right now. So if some of those kids leave the development team, all bets are off, because that's a message that they're just shooting right across the bow to the rest of the American hockey population. But I really think the USHL is going to struggle to get those high-end American players who can physically play at that level. We'll see, and we'll talk about it later. But if the CHL is successful in getting the Americans, more Americans than what they have right now, they have to come from somewhere. And they're coming from the development team or they're coming from the USHL.
Bob, I got a question for you. And this is going to be something we'll cover in more detail on later shows. But one of the things I talked about in the first episode is my time working in around studying the NCAA. They are very big on blanket legislation, right? And rules and guidelines. They don't like to have one rule in recruiting for one sport and do different things for others, right? So it's one of the things that gets missed in the sport of hockey with this junior hockey development system and players coming in later. Do you think, in your opinion, it is partially the NCAA's job to care where its players come from? And if they cross over the border as U.S. players into Canada to go to the CHL, it's technically hurting the USHL, the NA, the US product. Should the NCAA care, in your opinion, or should it just be the best players from wherever they come from come to us and that's our job?
So one of the agents that I talked to today said, is it really the NCAA's job to develop NHL players? Or is it their job just to put together a good program and win their conference or win their division and try and win a Division I championship? That's as far as the NCAA goes, my guess is there's football, there's basketball, and there's everything else. Yeah. And I believe that we have this rule because of Indianapolis, not because of the coaches in Division I hockey, and they didn't want the litigation. It's up to the coaches now in Division I hockey, I believe, to take the lead. Maybe they need to do a white paper. They need to figure it out themselves so that they can take that message, now that the rule has been changed, to Indianapolis and make sure that Indianapolis hears them. Now, will Indianapolis listen to them? I don't know. I mean, I've never been in the NCAA offices. Obviously, I've dealt with the NCAA Division I hockey coaches. Here's why I would care, Dan, to answer your questions.
Yeah.
What's an average scholarship worth? Well, let's just say we have somebody get their calculator out. We have 64 teams, and let's just say an average roster is 26. What's that number?
1664.
1664 times 60,000. That's 100 million reasons, okay, why I think Division One hockey should still want to produce players for the National Hockey League. Now, they might stop and say, Bob, you're off your rocker. We're always going to produce players for the National Hockey League. Well, when we go to slide 2 right now, okay, that might not be the case. We might be winding back the clock to 1967 when there were 5 players from Division One in the National Hockey League. Because when we get to topic number 2, if they're going to get all the 16 and 17-year-olds the CHL, the question is, are the CHL going to be able to keep those 18 and 19-year-olds? When they turn 16 and 17, those 17s are going to turn 18. Those 18s are going to turn 19. To me, if Division One hockey is going to get a return on their investment, and you measure that return by NHL hockey players, the real battle here, guys, is not for the 16 and 17-year-olds. They're juniors and seniors in high school. For the Canadians, that's grade 11 and grade 12. The battle is when they graduate high school. When typically, guys, in your senior year in high school, that's your NHL draft year. I would think for the investment that Division One hockey is making here, that they would want to have everybody who is drafted, because most of the drafting in the NHL for North American is going to come out of the CHL, that for the odd one that's going to go to the NHL, like Max Celebrina or Oren Power, that they're all going to go to Division One hockey. To me, that's it. Okay, so Lucas, put up the pie draft, because it's interesting what you can find on the internet. There's all kinds of studies, all kinds of information. The numbers are all out there. There's an interesting study from dauberprospects.com. Have no idea who they are. Thank you for letting us promote your product and your research paper. We really appreciate it. But they did a very intriguing study. They took a total, they looked from 2000 to 2009, all of the NHL drafts. And there were 2,100 draft selections. And what they found out was 37% of the players who played 100 games or more in the NHL were drafted in the first round. 17.2% were drafted in the second round. That's basically 55%. If you weren't drafted in the first or second round, forget about it. Now, that leaves 45% for the other rounds. But I can tell you, the first and second rounds where it's at. Lucas, now you can go to the draft slide to show us the 2004, 2005, NHL draft. And what you're going to notice here is there were 27 players drafted in the CHL. 3 only came out of NCAA because, hey, Celebrity advanced, Power advanced, okay? But most of them aren't getting there to the NCAA until their draft year. The USHL, to their credit, has had more NHL draft picks than the Western League and the Quebec League every year, I think, for the last 5 years. And they kind of alter with the OHL every year. Okay, but you see that the USHL, excluding the development program last year, only had 5 guys in the first 2 rounds. The development team, I would argue, kind of had an off year. They only had 2 in the first round. What you really have to ask yourself is, what happens when the CHL just doesn't get their 27, but they get the 5 from the USHL? And what happens if they get 2 from the development program?
Yeah.
Then the way parents look at these things today is, if Johnny's doing it, maybe I should do it. Hey, look at the portal in the NCAA itself. Everybody goes to their program as true freshmen. A third of them want out because they didn't get what they expected they were going to get out of the program. I wish I could say it was academically. We all know it was athletically. They think it's rosier on the other side. This is the danger that that the NCAA is up against, because let's just say that CHL runs the table and they get all 39 of those players. And let's say the CHL keeps those players at 18 and 19. Well, the ones that are good enough to play professional hockey, they're gone to pro.
Yeah.
Probably the AHL, some of them the NHL. But they're off to professional hockey. If Division I hockey only takes the age outs from the CHL after all the players have defaulted to the CHL, we talked about this last time. There is already a business model out there. It's called U-Sport.
Mm-hmm.
Those kids are good hockey players in U-Sport, and they work hard in U-Sport. But they're in U-Sport for a reason. And there's a reason why there's 0 players in the National Hockey League who come from U-Sport. Division I hockey as a huge, and we'll talk about this when we talk about Division I hockey and what they should be doing if we were in their warm room and we were recommending to them. But if Division I hockey is not adjusting when they're recruiting hockey players, it's over.
And the problem is when you look at the NCAA, this is, again, it's a one-off problem. When you look at any sport, is college basketball competing with AAU programs? They're not. They're not, right? They're using them as a tool to find players and to recruit with. Is college baseball dealing with the same thing in AAU or SSSA or whatever leagues guys are coming from there? No, they're not dealing with that. They're using it as a way to find their talent and cultivate it at the age of 18. This is a one-off, right? And it's something that without some rule being put in place when it comes to when players enter, you're putting a lot of onus on 60 plus NCAA Division I coaches to carry a torch for all of American hockey and all of the future of college hockey that I don't know if guys want to put their jobs on the line to carry.
I can tell you right now, the infrastructure that the CHL has dwarfs Division I hockey.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. There's more scouts. There's more resources out there for CHL teams than there is Division I schools. They've added to their staffs. And listen, they have their contacts. And they'll have you Division I people will tell you, I'm friends with agents. I'm friends here. I'm telling you, CHL people, they have people in the buildings all the time.
Yep.
Plain and simple. And if it's true that these players all default to the CHL, not only will they be in the CHL be in the buildings when they are recruiting the player, they will actually have control over the player.
Yep.
Right?
I mean,
and when I say control to make a daily impression on these kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is where the fight is, guys. And if you're the CHL, now play it the other way, guys. Let's say Division I goes after all these players and they get them. Then what does that turn the CHL into? Turns it into a 16, 17-year-old league. Right? It turns the CHL into the feeder for Division I hockey. I don't see any way around this, guys. And remember, today we're talking about what does the CHL want? The CHL wants all the best 16 and 17-year-olds in North America, and they want to keep them when they're 18 and 19 years old. If there's no fight for those 18 and 19-year-olds from the Division I programs, they're going to keep them.
Yep.
Because right now, I can tell you this for 100% for sure. Because I was around all these kids for 20 years. There were all kinds of players that went to the CHL who, if you asked them at 15 or 16 years of age, would you be interested in playing Division I hockey? Now, remember, you'd have to keep your eligibility, right? They would say, I would be very interested. Just nobody knocked on their door. So when nobody knocks on your door from Division I, when you're 15 or 16 or 17 or 18, what are you going to do?
Yep.
You want to be a hockey player. You're gonna go to where 50% of the players in the National Hockey League are being developed. And it used to be 100%. That's where you're gonna go. And believe me, they're knocking on your door. This is where the game is going to be played at, guys. Right here. 18 and 19 years old. Right after their NHL draft year. Whoever wins that battle, if you're measuring wins and losses by who's producing NHL hockey players, Division One or CHL, this is the age group that you can look at. Plain and simple.
I think the one thing that kind of sticks in my head here, Bob, is something you talked about a few minutes ago. And it is the idea that the coaches are the ones that have to kind of raise their voices a little bit. And it certainly feels like that shouldn't be their responsibility. Not to say that the coaches aren't equipped to handle it, because they obviously are. They are the ones that certainly are have the talent focus, right? They have the eyes for talent, but it feels like they shouldn't be the ones that are raising this issue. This should have been something that the NCAA kind of dealt with on their own.
I watched a documentary the other night with Roy Williams, the basketball coach at UNC, and Mike Krzyzewski. Duke against North Carolina. You can't have a tougher rivalry than those two, right? And of course, they're best friends. And Krzyzewski's been saying it forever. Division One basketball needs a commissioner. The NCAA in Indianapolis has way too much to worry about. It's no different in Division One hockey. They need a president. They need a CEO. They need somebody who's going to represent them and listen to all of those coaches and then take that back to Indianapolis. They don't have that right now.
And the biggest problem...
That's Krzyzewski saying that. Sorry, that's Krzyzewski, not Bob Turow.
I know. And the biggest problem, though, for guys like Krzyzewski, and it's why you're seeing a lot of those Krzyzewski-aged guys out of the game now, or guys that have had that success leaving, is because the NCAA, it's making decisions. I think as hockey people, all of us tapped into this game so deeply, we're looking at it through a hockey guy or hockey gal lens. When you look at it through the NCAA lens, it's really just avoiding legal trouble, right? And that's an opinion-based statement right there. I don't want to say that's completely factual, but when you look at the way this is happening, I am seeing lawsuits starting to be fired my way. Let's get rid of those. We're not dealing with this issue in any other collegiate athletic event or sport that we're overseeing. Let's get this out of the way and move on. It's not our job to develop players from cradle to college. It's not our job to do these things. Our job is to bring in athletes, give them a college education, and move them on. That's what we do.
We're going to talk more about this when we talk about Division One when it's their night.
Yep.
But you have to talk about it right now because this is where the battle is going to be fought. And I'll just add one last thing before we skip on to our next agenda item. NHLPA agents are going to play a big part in this.
Yep.
And I don't know much about NIL. It's going to play a big part in it, or no part at all. I have no idea what's out there as far as money. But if you don't have structure and organization with the D1 people, they're going to have a real tough time here recruiting the players that they are used to recruiting at a lot of these big schools. Lucas, switch it over to the next agenda item, which is the next goal of the CHL, which is they want to send the 19 and 20-year-old age outs either to professional hockey. It's going to be very few of those guys. There's only so many spots. We went over the numbers. That's why you have to watch episode 1, right, Dan?
Yeah, you got to keep watching.
And that means there's going to be a whole bunch of people heading to Division One hockey as age outs. This is what the CHL wants. Why do they want it? Well, they want to keep the best players until they're 19. But here's the real reason why they want it. There's somewhere between 10 to $15 million worth of liability on their books for school packages right now. And if they can send all of their kids, they won't be able to send all of them, but if they can send a whole whack of them and get that education money off their books, it's found money. We're going to send, think about if you're the CHL, we're going to send our best players to pro, and we're going to send the kids who aren't going to pro to Division One, and you pay their full scholarship.
Yep.
I know a lot of people who are going to listen to this who are D1 fanatics who are going to say, you're off your rocker. This can never happen. It can happen. That's goal number one. Now, what would they do with that cash? Well, I've been around a couple of owners. They can pocket it, put it in their money, go on a nice vacation.
Yep.
They can invest it. And that would be the worst nightmare if you're battling with Division One. If they invested into more recruiting or better facilities, okay, then it's even more of an enticement for players to go to and stay in the CHL. I had a player agent tell me on the weekend, no comparison as far as facilities go. Both the arena, I'm talking about in general now, the arena and the off-ice facilities, no comparison between Division One and CHL. Division One kills it. They brought up specific examples of specific programs. And listen, I know in Division One you have your best locker rooms and you're not so good. But the not so good are as good or better than the CHL ones. What happens if they take that money that they're saving and they start building out locker rooms or weight rooms?
Yep.
I mean, now it just dug the hole even further.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to funnel money, right? If you're a good owner, you funnel it into things that help the players develop and help make their experience better. If you're a bad owner, you funnel that money into a golf course in your backyard, right? Like those are kind of the two ways you go about it. And I think that those things become pretty apparent pretty quickly. But once you start talking about spare change in the form of $15 to $20 million, the motivation for all this starts to become really, really clear. Most of junior and college hockey is a game of follow the money, right? And it's less Candyland and more chutes and ladders. It sends you all over the place. But once you start to track it down, the motivation does become pretty clear. And I think you paint a very effective picture there, Bob.
I mean, take it to the furthest example that you can have. I watched Texas play Arkansas on the weekend, Dan.
Yep.
They said Texas has the most expensive line in all of football, right? And they were talking the NFL. Like, I mean, even if the rules didn't change with NIL, and I have no idea, again, how much NIL money is out there, how much expense money is out there. But, boy, if a program in Division One under the old rules wanted to go from the outhouse to the penthouse, all it takes is money.
Yeah.
That's it. Forget about this CHL, NCAA thing. I mean, the collective bargaining, none of that matters. If you want the best NCAA team, just buy it. Mm-hmm. So, Lucas, we're going to go to point number 4 that the CHL is looking at, and let's just assume for a second they get all the best North Americans at 16 and 17, keep them at 18 and 19. Isn't the next step to take a look at the Europeans and try and get them and try and create a super league before pro hockey that has all of the best players in the world in one location. Doesn't that make sense? Like
Yeah.
right now in the CHL, there were 3 kids who were Euros, played in Europe last year, came over to the CHL. Adam Jurasek, drafted by St. Louis, number 16, played in the Czech Republic. He's playing in the OHL. Emil Hemming from Finland, drafted in the first round by Dallas, playing in the OHL. Gabriel Eliasson, drafted in the second round from Sweden, 39th overall, playing in the OHL. I'd have to go back and look at it, but when I was in the OHL, I thought there was more, and I'm going to check this out. There was more Europeans coming over to play in the CHL. Maybe this is just an anomaly, or maybe as we looked at in episode 1 that everybody should watch, you can see that the European leagues, not just the pro leagues, but the junior leagues are having more NHL draft picks and players are staying over there. But wouldn't that be the next goal, to get all the best Europeans and jump those numbers up? I mean, then you truly have the Super League, Lucas.
And isn't that everyone's goal? Is to form a super league in whatever their sport is, right? I mean, it's been tried in different sports at different levels to try to, and essentially what it is to poach the best from other places and put them all in one spot. I think that if the CHL gets the 16, 17-year-olds and they start kind of getting the 19-year-olds, the 18-year-olds, I mean, why not? And I think it's not because it's this is just the next step in the process. It is the logical step, because if you can get those other 2 things, you have already created such a massive attractive force for yourself. It's not a matter of we should try to get the Europeans. It's almost a matter of we're going to have to turn highly skilled Euros away because we already have so much talent. They're going to be knocking on our door to become a part of something.
So that leads us to point number 5 for the CHL, which is they want the assistance of the NHLPA guys, who we've already figured out the majority of them would prefer to have their players play in the CHL because they're going to sign an NHL contract and they're going to start paying, whether it be the NHL or the AHL, that agent back with their commission. So there will be not just a fight for the 18 and 19-year-olds. There will be a fight for the NHLPA agents, for their influence. As I was talking to these NHLPA agents, it became, and we started spitballing ideas. Their leverage points are going to be increased. They're going to have way more power. They're power brokers now. They're going to be big time power brokers in this thing. Right now, the National Hockey League gives both USA Hockey and the CHL development money. I'm not sure what the exact amount is. It used to be $9 million. It may be a little bit more than that. The CHL right now has a system of divvying that money up. I believe their system is they basically take half of it, divide it up equally, and then the rest is based on who gets drafted. So it's on a merit-based system. Again, this is money that the CHL has used to invest back into the program.
Question for you. And
Yeah.
This could be the dumb guy in me who wants to see the world of college hockey grow, right? We're talking about more talent to the CHL. We're talking about a pipeline from the CHL to the NCAA Division I level. We're talking about all this, but we're not growing the game in the NCAA, right? The NCAA Division I level is not growing right now. In fact, we lose AIC to Division II. I just had a great conversation with someone in my DMs about this, kind of educating them on why that move would be made, about the fact that you only need to have 13 scholarship players or 13.5 scholarship players distributed around your roster to save money. Does the NHL, does USA Hockey, do they owe it to the game here in the States, to those players in the States, to throw money at the college game to try to stimulate the growth of organizations in places that are not traditionally hockey? You look at all these Big Ten schools. Imagine UCLA playing against USC in the Staples Center. in a hockey game at the Division One level of the NCAA. Imagine Georgia playing a hockey game against Florida and playing down in Jacksonville. Imagine these opportunities. Does money ever get thrown at that issue to grow the game there, or does that never benefit the NHL and they just stay away?
Should the NHL um, care about Division One hockey? Well, Division One hockey, first of all, has to care about themselves, right? They have to strategize and do their thing. But I've always believed that as far as the NHL goes, there's no more money to be had out of Canada. I don't think they're going to expand there anymore. The markets aren't there. When they go to 36 teams, they're going to go to non-traditional hockey markets in the United States. And this is not a slag on the Red Deer Rebels or the London Knights or the Kitchener Rangers or the Quebec Ramparts. I know they're all wonderful organizations. But the truth of the matter is, somebody in Atlanta or Arizona has no clue who a London Knight is. Zero.
Yep.
Your average hockey fan, no clue. If you're asking me why the NHL should get involved in college hockey and make sure that's where all their players come from, because they have alumni. And alumni travel, and alumni are all around the United States, and alumni spend money. That's why they should. And the NHL should get involved with what you're talking about by trying to get the Florida Gators, North Carolina Tar Heels, Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, stop it already. Now, we're going to talk about that strategy on the Division One side, but you asked me about the NHL. To me, and if I could have an hour with Gary Bettman just to ask him 5 questions and listen and learn, man, that would be like a bucket list item. But I think he's missed on this one. And I know that he's not wanted to tip the scales as far as any of the development ladders into the NHL. But this is a game changer. And what's he going to do? What's the National Hockey League going to do? I have no idea. We'll find out. Let's talk about expansion in the CHL, because I know the clock is running. There have been media reports come out that the Quebec League would like to come in to New England. Oh. There's been media reports that the Ontario Hockey League, there was a list of 9 sites in Ontario, but really where they would like to come into is the United States. As we talked about earlier, it's a lot easier to get Americans if they don't have to leave America. Yep. Make sense?
Yep.
I've not heard anything from the Western League, but listen, they already have 5 of their 22 teams that are in America. Maybe that's it for them. I don't know. So, I believe if you have, just paint the picture, if you get all the 16 and 17-year-olds and you keep them at 18 and 19, and Lucas, number 3 was you're going to get rid of the school packages, okay? And number 4 was you're going to get a whole bunch of Europeans because you're in bed with the player agents, okay? Then you've got the players to expand. Now, where do you expand? I can't speak to Quebec and the Western Hockey League that well, but what I can tell you is I think they've kind of taken all the markets that are available out there. I mean, they took some from the BCHL out west. The Quebec League has shuffled the deck a couple of times. I mean, you really have to come to America. The Quebec League tried America. It didn't work. That doesn't mean that it can't work again with the proper ownership and the proper building, et cetera, et cetera. I just talked about how wonderful I think Dave Branch has been as far as an executive goes. Don't kid yourself. He's been looking in America forever. It used to be just the Plymouth Whalers. Then he added Erie. Then Saginaw came. Then Plymouth went away, and they brought in Flint. I mean, they'd be looking for markets. And, Ontario is a knife right into America. I mean, can they get one of the pro markets that's in the United States that's close? I don't know. They'll be looking. You've heard about the USHL. We've heard reports. This is nothing that we're breaking, that Muskegon, Youngstown, and I've heard Chicago, who I believe is owned by the Blackhawks now, are all looking at the OHL. Here's the question. What's the price tag to get in? If the CHL is going to hurt the USHL, why would they just take the USHL as the fourth major junior league? Why not just take their players and tell them to go away? Does that make sense, Dan?
A lot of sense. Makes business sense.
Okay. So the only thing that makes business sense is they come into the league and they pay the franchise tag. So what's the franchise tag? And this is where I think, and I come back to my speech to our members, measure me by one thing: franchise value. Measure Gary Bettman, franchise value. Ottawa's valued at $650 million. He starts the bidding process. It's $1 billion. You know those next franchises for Gary Bettman are going to start at 1.5 to $2 billion. Start with the ticket. So here's, I think, the problem that the CHL has. And I'm going to speak specifically to Ontario. I'm told, don't know this for a fact, that the last two franchises in the Ontario Hockey League sold for $18 and $22 million. If you take a look, I know a little bit about budgets about major junior hockey. You take a look at what these teams are cash flowing. Let's say they cash flow $500,000 a year. What are you looking at, Dan?
Looking for my change bucket. I can't find it. I don't think I have change.
Dan likes a prop.
I was looking for my change.
He was going to try to rattle some change around.
I don't think I can count enough. I don't think
so in the Ontario Hockey League, the last two franchises I believe that have been sold are Barrie. I think that might have been in '95 for $750,000, and St. Mike's shortly after that. Don't quote me on these years and these numbers for $1.5 million. If you're cash flowing $500,000, it's a 44 multiple.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're cash flowing $1 million, forget about the London Knights and the Kitchener Rangers and forget about the big guys. Okay. Not everybody in Major League Baseball can afford a Tawny. Only a couple of teams are Soto, right? And we know who they are. Okay. So forget about those teams. If you're an OHL owner right now and you say, good job, Dave Branch, $18 and $22 million. Cha-ching, cha-ching. How does the OHL sell a franchise for something that makes sense? A very rich person that we all know who told me one time that he would like to have an OHL team. He's trying to buy an OHL team right now, as a matter of fact. And I ran these numbers by him, and he said, Bob, you don't get it. There's only 20 of them. I've got the money, and I want one. It's like a fine piece of art.
It's like a yacht.
It is what it is. I mean, but it's expansion is what they want, and they're going to be working hard for it in the near future. The last topic is, how do you take everything that we just talked about today and monetize it if you're the CHL? We just talked about expansion. I mean, if there's 20 teams in the Ontario Hockey League and they expand by one and it's $20 million, it's $1 million a team. That's a lot of cash.
Yeah.
Or if you turn this league into a super league, can you get a real TV deal? They have a TV deal. One of the best things about playing in the Ontario Hockey League, I don't know about the West or Quebec, you're always on cable, and the cable productions are pretty good. But then they have the national game of the week on TV. I think I'm not sure if it's on TSN or Sportsnet, but they have that. How do you get a real TV deal? How do you drive more ticket revenue when all of the NHL draft choices are coming out of your league and they're staying in your league? When you get more ticket people in, more eyeballs, whether it be on TV or whether it be actually in the arena. Your sponsorship team is driving up revenue. If the CHL gets the best players, there's more revenue for them. Hey, when we talk about Division One, we'll talk about the same thing. But I'm just saying right now, gentlemen, this fight's going to be, if the NCAA wants it, if Division One wants it, it's going to be for the 18 and 19-year-olds. Are they staying in the CHL or are they coming to Division One?
And that,
Dan, what do you got for us?
ladies and gentlemen, that was a masterclass, as we would call it. A masterclass in informationalism, but more, that's a word I just made up, by the way, Lucas. You should like that. You know, you got to invent words once in a while. But more importantly, it's a clear line in the sand for these big entities in hockey right now, from the biggest, the CHL right now with this news, the biggest, to the NCAA, to the USHL, to everyone in between. And we have to cover it all, but you have to watch it all. You have to take it all in. You have to watch Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. If you're watching us on one right now, if you're watching us on the audio version, go watch the video on youtube.com. Check out the incredible work Lucas Jones is doing. Check out everything being put on your air. Also, ask questions. I had a lot of incredible conversations via my DMs that didn't touch this topic today. We will eventually be throwing those at Bob, but I want questions from today with the CHL. I want questions from anything you can throw at us. More importantly, we'll also now be tracking via all Dan K Show pages at _Dan K Show. Go follow any news involving player movement to the CHL or player movement from the CHL to the NCAA. This is going to be an exciting next few weeks, and you want to be nowhere else but the Dan K Show to see it all. Right, Lucas?
100% right. There is so much money, so many people, so much on the line for so many folks out there. And we're going to try our best to keep everybody up to date, informed, and hey, maybe one of our opinions will strike a chord with someone out there. But like Dan said, reach out to us at the _Dan K Show, www.dankshow.com. Use the contact form. Your question might get answered by expert Bob Turow.